is He. Sing a new song to Him who sits on heaven's mercy seat. Sing it again. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Holy, holy is He. Sing a new song to Him who sits on heaven's mercy seat. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Oh, I will adore you. Clothed in rainbows of living color, flashes of lightning, rolls of thunder. Blessing and honor, strength and glory and power be to you, the only wise King. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. You are my King. Filled with wonder, awestruck wonder, at the mention of your name. Jesus, your name is power, breath and living water, such a marvelous mystery. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. can be seated.
Some worship, guys. Well, Anna, come on up. One of our priests in Birmingham with the Lamb of God, Father Scott Howard. This is his daughter, Anna. You're the oldest, right? All the children. Yes, of the 4 children. And Anna is a missionary in Thailand. And so Bishop asked her a few weeks ago she would come tonight and speak and tell us about what she does and all that cool stuff. So,
Anna, would it be better if, would you like all the lights on, or would it be better to have these dim? That's what I'm asking her. I think it shows pretty good. Do you? I will say this is probably the biggest screen that any of my presentations have ever been on. So this is quite a lot of stuff. I've also never had a microphone to my own, so that's really nice. But yeah, generally I'm an English teacher, so if I move a lot, it's because I'm just used to like walking around and teaching English and telling all these kids everything that I know about Shakespeare and whatnot. But anyway, so tonight I'm gonna share with you guys a little bit about what I do in Thailand, and yes, it does involve some teaching English and stuff, but much of it is working with what I would like to call the forgotten field. Could you go ahead and put the first slide up? Yes. Okay. So I work with what is actually commonly called the forgotten field. Now, in a world in which like we see all of the Facebook posts about all of the needs in the whole world, and we always have things like like this, if you want to support this or something like that, this group of people I've never really seen advertised as like a need, and so they're truly the forgotten field. I want to ask you guys if you think maybe you know what that might be. What in a world where we see like so many needs expressed on social media, in the news, and all those things, take a moment and just think like, what have we all forgotten? The answer is missionary kids. I work with missionary children, actually. I work with the children who are on the field with their parents. It's commonly called the forgotten field because what happens is actually a pastor of mine in Thailand gave the statistic that about 75% of missionary children walk away from the faith at some point in their life. Oftentimes this is because they see, I was doing a lot of research on this, and they oftentimes see, the nitty-gritty of the mission field, and they see lots of things in their life, and they also just feel very, outside of any kind of culture, really. They're very outside. So this is the kind of people group that I work with, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about like some of the things that they struggle with and things. But we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So many of you may remember my parents took several short-term mission trips to Brazil when I was younger. And this is the first place where I really felt like I was 13 years old when I went, my place where I felt like the Lord was going to call me on the mission field. Basically, I just felt like suddenly I was like, oh, this is what I want to do with life, Like if you had asked me at 12 what I wanted to do with life, I would have said a horse veterinarian, But like as a 13-year-old, as soon as I went to Brazil, I was suddenly like, I want to be a missionary. This is what I want to do with life. And you'd think that I would be in Brazil, but no, for some reason the Lord led me to somewhere else. But I did kind of start building my life around this. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I started building my life around this kind of idea that I wanted to work and live on the mission field, and so I worked at Chick-fil-A to get all the way through UAB with a degree. I tried my hardest to get through with no debt, and I did it. So that was really I feel impressed with myself sometimes, but anyway, it's like one of my proudest feats. I got through without any debt. But the reason I put this little tiny cow picture up here on the right or the left, I guess y'all's left, is because that's me in there. It's one of my jobs at Chick-fil-A was to be the baby cow for many, many years. I was at circuses and all sorts of things. So I also did a lot of child care events there. So we did our Pirate Day and stuff. But after I graduated, I kind of was asking the Lord, like, all right, where do you want me to go? Because I thought I was going to go to Brazil, but it just didn't seem like that was where he was pulling me to. And so I started feeling a pull towards Asia. And the CEC doesn't have a lot of churches in Asia, so I started having to kind of look outside of our church and stuff. And that was when the Lord led me to Overseas Missionary Fellowship. You can go on to the next one. This is kind of where I felt the real call, the Great Commission, as we call it. Go therefore and make disciples of all men. And the reason I put this map up here is because these are the people groups of the missionaries that are in OMF in Asia. They do a lot of the unreached people groups, a lot of the urban. They're like all over in all of these different people groups. The other reason I put this map up here is because these are the places in which the children that I work with live. So I tend to travel a lot to go and visit many of these kids. Part of my thing is, just making sure that these kids are getting taken care of, both academically, emotionally, all of these things. You can go to the next slide. All right, so TCK is the term that we usually use for missionary kids. So the first, basically TCK stands for Third Culture Kid. So if we take the fact that the first culture is the culture in which they come from, in which they have a passport, from the U.S. or from Australia or Korea or England or something like that, and then the second culture is the culture in which they're living, like China or Thailand or anywhere else like that. What would you think that the third culture would be? You don't have to answer, but I'll give you guys a second to think about it. So the third culture tends to be the culture within, basically the blending of cultures within themselves. Oftentimes, third culture kids really struggle with finding some sense of identity, which is why they struggle so much, when they go back to their passport countries. It's the biggest thing that they struggle with, especially when they go back for college, because it's a very impressionable age. You can go to the next slide. I just want you guys to this is my little metaphor here. So I want you guys to take a moment and just kind of like observe the two things. There are two things that are the same in both of these, but then everything else around them is different. So in the first picture, the one on your left. Actually, we'll do the one on the right for right now. So the one on the right, the green apple amongst all the red apples, this is kind of what the kids feel while they're in the countries where their parents are serving. Oftentimes, they feel they identify most with that culture. I knew kids who were literally born and raised in China who spoke Chinese fluently, almost better than they spoke English, and they understood what made Chinese people laugh, and they understood what was taboo in that culture. And yet they were not treated like, as they grew up in the education system, they were not treated like equals by a lot of the children around them. They were treated kind of outside of that because they look different, because there's no way that they're going to look at these kids from England and they're going to say, oh, obviously they're Chinese. Like, in the kids' mind, that's what they feel like, because this is the culture in which they are in which they're most comfortable. On the left is kind of what they feel like when they go back home. They look like everybody. They're treated like they're supposed to know everything. But they go home and there's a huge culture shock because suddenly, I knew kids who had never seen a Disney movie, who'd never seen a Marvel movie. Could you imagine entering into college and not having seen any of those things? They don't know anything about sports, especially, football. They don't know anything about anything that wasn't shown in China or in Thailand or in all of these other things. So they find it very hard to adjust when they come back for college. So it's a really, really hard thing. So these are the kids that I work with. In 2018, you can go to the next slide. In 2018, I had the opportunity to go over to Thailand and live in a dorm with 16 other kids, basically, and I told them I was their professional big sister. And it was really hard because a lot of these kids are used to people coming and going. And you talk about short-term workers, who come in for like 2 weeks or maybe 6 months at the most, and then they leave. Or you see friends at conferences like once a year, and then you don't see them for the rest of the year. And a lot of times you're in countries in which you can't communicate with your friends outside of, especially the big country up north, as we call China sometimes. It's really hard for them to communicate. So living in this dorm with a lot of these kids, they didn't really want to open up to me. They saw me as just another transitionary person in their life. And it's also really hard to kind of develop relationships and share Christ with them because they know everything, And much like those of us that grew up in the church, we know everything, we've heard all the Bible stories. We know we've memorized verse after verse. And these kids have done the same thing, Many of them have been educated at home. Many of them have, gone to vacation Bible schools or, conferences in which, they get preached at, and all stuff. So it's really hard knowing how to help kids who just see me as temporary, So how would you guys kind of do that, Like what can you do to witness to a kid? And let me tell you, some of these kids I know from just the things that they would say were not saved. Their parents may be missionaries, but these kids were struggling with their faith. And it's very hard to witness to them. I mean, what do you do? What can you do? The best answer is just to kind of live with them and listen to them, and pray about it. Honestly, that was pretty much the only thing that I could do. So for about 6 months, I just felt like these kids did not want to talk to me at all. Like those that would open up, it was usually just about schoolwork, like, oh, this class, oh, that teacher, And I was kind of like, all right, but like, what about your spiritual life, And of course, they didn't want to open up about that. Well, wouldn't you know it, the Lord loves to work in mysterious ways. And of all the things that he uses to talk to these kids, you can go to the next slide, he uses a high school dance. Wouldn't you know it? So these kids go into a large international school where they had a high school dance. And of course, like all teenagers, nothing shakes up a house like a high school dance. They were all, everybody was trying to play it cool, like, it's okay if I don't get asked, it's fine, it's all right. All of the teenagers were like, yeah, the girls were like, it's okay if we don't have anybody to go with, it's fine. And then one of the girls got asked. And suddenly all bets were off, and all the other girls were like, but am I just like unlovable? Like, why does nobody want me? All that stuff. And I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit and was like, oh my gosh, it's just a high school dance, But I remember being that age. So I asked them, I was like, all right, you know what? I told them, I was like, you know what? God cares about this, probably, more than us adults in this house. But God cares about it enough. So I'm going to pray that all of you guys get asked to the dance next week. And one of the girls was really, really hard to get to know because she had just been used to being very independent, and suddenly she was in a dorm with a lot of rules. And so she was really hard to get to know. She took it out on a lot of it on me and the dorm mother and stuff. And so she just kind of rolled her eyes at me. She was just like, yeah, whatever, who cares? Well, within 24 hours, all the girls had been asked to the dance. And this girl who I'd had such trouble getting her to follow rules, getting her to even just open up and talk to me, she came up to me and she goes, I really didn't think he cared. And that broke my heart. I was like, well, yeah, he cares. I had never prayed like that before in my life, going like, all right, this is what the Lord's going to do, because I don't like to dictate what the Lord's going to do, but he did it. And it really became a huge witness, and that girl and I are still like really close. She is now, I didn't think she was going to go back on the mission field, but she actually went back on the mission field after she graduated high school, and she now works on the Mercy ships that go around the coast of Africa, administering medicine and children's programs for kids. So, and she sends me postcards, and we chit chat on Instagram and whatnot. And so she and I are still really close, and I'm somebody that she and I are both people now that we can open up to. And it was just wonderful, wonderful to have that kind of relationship. And the Lord was able to kind of bring that relationship about by something that I thought was kind of silly. But, you know, it was important to them, and therefore it was important to him. You can go to the next slide. Now, these two girls, on the other hand, had something very, very different happen to them. On top of normal, everyday teenage stuff that TCKs go through, these girls had something happen to them that I don't think anybody in our life has ever had, anybody in our acquaintance has ever had happen to us. And within a month of these girls moving into the dorm, much of the time the parents would send them to Thailand for education because the education system was better, but also for safety, especially if their parents worked in China. These two girls, their parents worked in China, and their parents sent them out of safety reasons because things are getting a lot tighter, have been and are still getting tighter, you know, today. Within a month of meeting these two girls, their parents went missing. And we didn't know where they were. We had no idea. They didn't know. They were still able to text their parents most days using, you know, certain encrypted kinds of software and whatnot. And suddenly they were not able to do that anymore. They completely evaporated. And it was really terrifying. And so we contacted, you know, our organization, and they figured out where they were. They were being held by the Chinese government in a police station, and they were held there for 9 days. The parents were not allowed to text, were not allowed to call, were not allowed to do anything to communicate with the outside world. They were just there, and they were questioned pretty much nonstop for 9 days. They were given food and water, so that wasn't too bad. But it was, you know, it was a pretty harrowing experience, especially for the girls. I mean, they were, you know, 14 and 15 at this time. You know, I can't imagine going through something like that, and I'm in my late 20s. It's just like, wow. And so 9 days later, the father calls them. He FaceTimes them, and he goes, "All right, what do you need from your room? Because we're leaving. We have 2 hours to get out of the country, and we're never coming back." And the girls had lived there for 7 years. This was their home, you know? This was a place where they had literally grown up. I mean, the one girl, she was 7 when she moved there, and now she's 14 living in Thailand and not even able to go and see the city for the last time, or see her house for the last time, or even remember what was happening. Remember what was in her room to be able to collect. It was quite stressful, and luckily their parents are out now, and their parents work I think in Taiwan now, so they can continue using their Chinese. But it was a very harrowing experience, and that was only within the first month of me moving to Thailand. I was suddenly like, this is the stuff that you read about, you know, about the 19th century. This is not stuff that happens now, you know, but it does, and it is. In fact, if you would go to the next slide, I don't know if any of you guys know what some of the things that are happening in China right now. These are the kids. These are the kinds of kids that are coming out that I work with. They're bulldozing churches, church buildings. They're taking entire congregations into custody and asking, basically telling the entire congregation that they have to sign a waiver denouncing everything that their pastor says. I don't know about you guys, but that would be very hard for me to do, you know? But it's also hard. They also have to pay fines, which many of them can't afford, in order to get out of just the police station. On top of that, they're also imprisoning Muslims at an alarming rate. Imprisoning many Muslims up to the north part, and they're putting them in what they call labor camps, re-education camps, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with that term, but it sounds very much like something that the Nazis would say. You know, it's the exact same terminology that the Nazis used in World War II. They are re-educating them by force-feeding them red meat and alcohol, which are against their religion. So it's a very, very tricky situation, and so missionaries are trying to stay, but many of them are having to flee because, I knew a family who had 9 children, and their youngest was 3. They knew that they were the next ones to get. Interrogated, so they just left. You know, I mean, what can you do? You have to take care of your children, your 9 children that you have with you. So they moved to Thailand, and close friends of mine now. But OMF had, I think, if I remember the numbers correctly, probably I'd say like 75% of the missionaries that were in China had to leave before COVID, and then after, like due to COVID, like many of them can't get back in. So yeah, these are the kids, you know, these like hurried rushing, like they're just rushing out of China and stuff. And so many of the kids that I work with are these kids coming out of these harrowing situations, these huge transitions that they're making. On top of just making transitions from school to college back in their countries where they're from, they're also having to make these transitions, some of them very, very young, and they don't understand what's going on. You know, it's very hard for kids. You can go to the next slide. So January 2020, right before COVID, like right as COVID numbers started climbing and stuff, I was over in Taiwan helping run a whole program to help these kids transition. And while we were there, we suddenly struck upon an idea that maybe we should have an entire team that would do this, where I would go to every single conference, and I would go to every single OMF conference all over Asia and lead the childcare there to kind of focus everybody on, you know, their mental and emotional health, their spiritual health, you know, discipling all these kids. And I was approached to lead this team, actually, which is really, I'm like, whoa, that's a huge thing. I've only been on the field 2 years, you know, and suddenly, but the doors seemed to open, and they really enjoyed, I really enjoyed working in this position and stuff. And so this is the kind of thing that I'm going back to do, is to actually work with these kids at conferences, outside of conferences, living, kind of working with them, continuing to communicate with them, kind of giving them a further support system. And then the wonderful thing is that the Lord has also laid it on many of the home side sectors of OMF, that they're actually starting their own teams that are like that. And what's funny is that these people did not communicate this before they came up with these team ideas. But now I'm friends with the one in the US, and they're starting to do this thing where they're actually traveling around to visit all of the OMF kids to see how they're doing, you know, because many of them have had to leave, you know, very hurriedly, very fast. And so this is the kind of thing that I'm going to be doing on the field, and then we have people here at home doing it as well, so that what will happen is, when I know of a kid who's graduating from high school, I can tell the U.S. Home Office and be like, hey, this kid, likes this, and they're going to this school. Do you have anybody in the area? And they can send people over there. So they'll have a full support system across the whole world. And so I mean, it's a huge blessing to just be. It's hugely humbling to really be a part of this, honestly. So I'm very grateful. You can go to the next one. It's a drawing that one of my little students sent me of me, and so she sent me that one. But something that I feel really passionately about working with these kids is that these kids are these are the kids who are going to take the footsteps into the future of missions. You know, these kids know more about missions than any of us who've never been, or even those of us who've only been on short-term missions. These kids know so much, and many of them, you know, I don't want to see that statistic, that 75%, walk away from the faith. If we can give them, if we can support them across the whole world, then I just pray that the Lord works through that, and this seems like a really good place to start. It'll be a long mission. It'll be the minimum of 4 years, probably 8 to 12, so we'll see. But yeah, I'm very humbled to know that God is kind of, moving me forwards into this position. So I didn't know if you were okay with me asking if anybody had questions. Yeah, if anybody had questions, or right now I'm just trying to wait for that visa and the financial stuff and whatnot. But yeah, the visa stuff, especially in COVID, is very tricky. So yeah, I don't know if anybody had any questions about a lot of the kids that I work with or anything like that. So yeah. I will, yeah. So Thailand has a 2-week quarantine in a hotel. They actually have quarantine hotels there, so I will have to quarantine in a hotel for 2 weeks. think so. I believe so. So that's part of my travel. Like they actually put that in my travel fund for when I go over. So like on top of, the plane ticket, which is, pretty steep, they also budget for that hotel. Because yeah, I think that's what they do, but pretty sure. Yeah, I didn't know if anybody else had any questions. If not, then that's fine. I'll just walk away. No, go ahead. Mhm. Yeah, it was a lot closer to China. um, yeah, I was in Taiwan when the news hit that Wuhan had shut their borders, and we were like, I hope I can get back into Thailand. In fact, I had friends who were on that team of mine. You could go back one, actually, if you will. Friends of mine who were on that team who were living in China at the time and who had come out to work the childcare at this conference, they were not allowed back in. So one of my friends actually came and lived with me for like a month and a half, almost 2 months, because she didn't have anywhere else to go. She had to leave all of, I mean, she only brought the stuff for the 2 weeks that we were supposed to be in Taiwan. She didn't bring all of her stuff, so most of her stuff is probably taken by the landlord. He probably just took it, she couldn't even get in contact with him because he doesn't really have a cell phone, So her neighbors went in and tried to get some of her stuff, but they couldn't get everything. So, yeah, I mean, she had built a house there and a life there, and suddenly she had to kind of up in that. But the Lord brought her home for a reason. She was very depressed at first, about coming back to the States. But the Lord brought her home for a reason because she's getting married in September. So she came back, and her fiance wants to move on to the mission field with her. So it's a huge benefit. The Lord kind of brings people together, and so it all turned out okay in the end. But yeah, it was a little scary living in. I mean, they locked down hard when, like in Thailand when I was there, and they locked down, like literally you could order food to be delivered, but no restaurants were allowing anybody in. They stopped selling any kind of alcohol. They stopped selling at all. Like they only had certain like avenues in the grocery store that you could go into, and they were really strict. Every time you walked into a grocery store, there was somebody sitting there with the little, thermometer gun, like stop, and they take your temperature. And it's hot in Thailand, so like you'd walk in and they'd be like, oh, go stand under air conditioning. And I was like, okay. And then I'd stand under there for a second, and they take it again. They're like, okay, you good. It was which was okay. But yeah, I don't know. It was different. It was hard coming back too because the plane flights kept getting canceled. So there was only one flight going out of my city a day when there used to be like, and it would only go down to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok you could fly more places. But yeah, there were several people. So many of the kids that I worked with actually evacuated before the lockdown, and then like they went to go back and live with their parents. Most of them were in Korea or they had moved to like Hong Kong during the pandemic to get out of China. So a lot of the kids moved to those places just to kind of get back with their parents in case this lockdown lasted for a long time, which it did. It did. It lasted for a while. So most of them, except for the two whose parents were still in China, they couldn't go. No, they were the two British kids. Their parents were still in China, and they have an adopted brother who was too old to actually be officially adopted, but he's from China, and so they didn't actually have anywhere that all 5 of them could go. So their parents just stayed in China with their brother, who's a paraplegic, to take care of him. So they had to stay at the dorm pretty much for like way over the summer. Like they had to stay there pretty much for like 6 or 7 more months after lockdown. So yeah, that was exciting. I was teaching English at the time as well, and I was trying to make sure, like I basically had to move to online teaching, and we were supposed to have a play at the end of the year, and we couldn't do it because none of the kids could get back to the school. Basically, the school wasn't allowed to open, so yeah, it was a lot of change. So, but I mean, we've all gone through a lot of changes here too, you know. It's been a lot. So, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I have a few kids who are Catholic, a few who are Southern Baptist, a few, like OMF is very diverse. Overseas Missionary Fellowship was started in 1865 by Hudson Taylor. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of that name. But it used to be called China Inland Mission, but it is no longer called that because they had to change their name after they got kicked out of China in the 50s. So that's the group I'm with, is Hudson Taylor's group from, so it's been around for 156 years or so. They had a big celebration when they hit 150. I was not with OMF at that time, so I missed out. I mean, like literally everybody that had ever been with OMF ever showed up in Singapore for a big conference, so sad. Came 2 years too late. So, but yeah, what were you gonna ask? Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. hmm So the first year I was, yeah, so the first year I was there, I lived in a dorm that was that all the kids there went to a big international school. The second year I went there, I still worked at the dorm, but I didn't live there. I was teaching at an actual OMF school for kids. This is what I was doing. For kids who were basically still living with their parents. They would travel to the school once a month, and we would teach them for a week, and then they would go back to live with their parents. So they were still kind of getting that kind of bond. They were still able to live with their parents for 3 weeks out of the month, and then they would come and get academic, like basically a lot of academic things. We were prepping them for the SATs, the ACTs, college courses and stuff like that. And we did a lot of discipleship there as well, but a lot of that was mostly focused on education. When I go back, it'll be mostly focused on discipleship. So that school is still running, and it's gotten a lot bigger, although they can't always meet in person because of COVID. So they've locked down 4 times now since I've been gone. So that's nice to be here, not have to continue locking down. So, but yeah. Yes. Did you have a question, or are you just? Oh, um, many of them are from America, but a lot of them are from Britain, Korea. Some of them are Thai. Some of them are Taiwanese. I mean, they're literally from all over. Australia, we had a lot of Australian kids. Dutch, lots of Dutch children. That family of 9 was all Dutch children, but they spoke English like pros. When I met them the first time, I was like, "Are you guys sure you're not American?" And they were like, "Nah, no, we speak, Dutch as well." So I was like, "Okay." But yeah, no, they're wonderful. It's a wonderful family. But yeah, I work with a lot of German people. Lots of German kids and things like that. So yeah, they're from all over Switzerland, and yeah, just everywhere, really. Which is different, It's definitely different for me because I've, lived in Alabama pretty much my whole life. So it's like suddenly thrown into like, okay, this is just gonna be like everybody. Yeah, I mean it's South Africa, some of them. Yeah, many people from all over. So it's very cool, but sometimes very tiring. Yes. Oh, yeah, so basically what we're trying to do right now is get all of the logistics figured out, especially since COVID's happening, so we can't actually travel around to see any of the kids yet. So what we're doing, like even while I've been here, I've actually worked online with kids doing children's programs where I'm reconnecting with a lot of the teenagers and some of the younger kids. Like we had a session with, these are a lot of the kids that are still on the field. There are a lot of programs going on with the kids who are back in America, and I'm still kind of like we're trying to connect them each other because TCKs don't feel like they feel most at home with other TCKs because they're the people who are experiencing the same things. So networking, sort of. A lot of it is going to be kind of working out the logistics of the team, and then getting, what we're hoping to do is get short-term workers to come over and just work with me for like 6 months to a year, and then I basically train them to go onto the field and work with these kids, and then I'll also be on the field with each of the kids too, so the kids can see my face, and then they get consistent teaching and discipleship, and hopefully continual communication and stuff, and then that also helps build a network back, in wherever the short-term workers are coming, because then those kids can reconnect with those people if they go to those countries. So yeah, we're trying to do a lot of networking, but a lot of it is kind of getting back over there to run logistics and stuff and see if we can, I'm still doing a lot of I've done multiple sessions with lots of different kids, like 10 or 12 kids at a time right now, where I'm just kind of there to facilitate and let them kind of talk amongst each other and share a tiny Bible story, like a little Bible story, and then have them talk and then ask them some deep questions and stuff. The teenagers get really deep. The babies don't get as deep. They're more like, let's play games, let's play, Father Abraham or something, so they're a little less. There's a little less planning that has to go into the little kids. A little less planning of like discussion questions and stuff. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It depends. It depends. So I've known both cases. I will say I don't know of 75% of the children that I've worked with have done that. But part of that is because of the infrastructure that OMF does have now and is continuing to try to build. But I did know like a few of the kids at the dorm were certainly not Christians. One of them was kind of more apathetic. I don't know that, like, it was very hard. I think living at the dorm away from his parents was very hard for him, but educationally he needed to be there because he was going back to Canada where he was from. And he was very hard to kind of get to know. He and I could only connect on like literature. Like, he really liked fantasy, and I also really like fantasy, so we would talk a lot about that. And he continued to communicate with me for pretty much a whole like year after he graduated and went to college. And I was the only person he was still communicating with. And I think it was because I never pushed him to, I try not to push him, too quickly towards, God and stuff. And so like he felt more comfortable with me. But I tried to kind of use the influence that I had there, the little bit of influence, eventually to start. I don't really know what's going on with him right now because I've been trying to keep up with him, but he doesn't really respond anymore. So, yeah, that can be challenging. So I'd say he definitely got more apathetic. Now I know of another friend of mine though that is now a Norse mythologist. I didn't know that was a thing. Yeah, like that's his legit religion. And now he was not with OMF. This is a personal friend of mine, actually, but he was a TCK. His family was working in Brazil. And when he came home, he just had a lot of resentment that he wasn't willing to talk about. And he's just had a lot of like kind of going back and forth. Like there are some years where I'll come home, like where I've come home, and he's like, out there preaching his faith in God again, and I'm like, oh, this is great. But then like most recently, he's a Norse mythologist, so he just has a lot of, again, it's an identity issue thing. It's a big identity issue. So if the kids feel comfortable enough to talk about it, many of the people who are on my team are psychologists. I'm a teacher, so I do a lot more of like the activity kind of side of it, but a lot of the people that I work with are psychologists. Some of them are public speakers, and stuff like that, who can talk to large groups of people and stuff. So yeah, we're trying to build a diverse team of regular, like of consistent faces for the kids to see, as well as, me training up all of the like short-term workers who will be able to make those kinds of connections back when they go back to their, home countries and stuff. So yeah, any other questions? These are all really good questions, by the way. Thank you guys for asking. Yep, yes I do. Yeah, I do have to raise support. Everything at OMF is volunteer, and I mean it's pro bono. So, yeah, right now I'm about 50%, and I need to be 100% by September. So it's a lot because like basically OMF will not let me go until I'm 100%. Now I've seen the Lord raise lots of money in just the 2 years that I've been there. So it's a lot, but yeah, it's a don't balk at this, okay? Because it's totally a God thing. So God has this. But yeah, it's about $100,000 left that I still have to raise. So that's a 4-year period. Yeah. So and that includes like all of the travel expenses to go and visit all these kids. So it may be less expensive that first year. But yeah, it thank you for asking too, by the way. OMF actually has a policy where we're not allowed to talk about it unless somebody specifically asks. So thanks for asking. Yeah, huh? Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I'm so thrilled to just have prayer partners, honestly, because like prayer is such an important thing. There was a man who came to speak to a bunch of young, me and a bunch of young people at a conference that they had for people of my age, and he said he had worked in Papua New Guinea with Wycliffe Bible translators for 20 years, and malaria is rife, like I mean just everywhere in Papua New Guinea. He had never gotten it, and then he and his wife go back to Singapore, where she's from, and Singapore does not have malaria. Like you don't have to get a malaria pill or shot to go to Singapore, and he got it within 4 months of being home in Singapore. And he said, and when we asked him, we were like, what on earth? What do you think happened there? And he goes, I think people stopped praying for me because we weren't on the field anymore. And I was like, oh. So he never got it from the 20 years that he was in the field. But as soon as he left the field, people stopped praying for him. He got malaria in a place where you're not supposed to be able to. So that was kind of. Well, I have to have it all pledged before I can go. So basically, it's like people who have committed to like monthly installments. That all counts to like the whole 4 years and stuff. So yeah, it's a lot of logistics. Yeah, it provides the income that I need. It provides money for my housing because I have a small house and stuff that I have to have, so that way I can have people come and live with me who are fleeing China. So but yeah, I mean it's a lot of medical insurance, and American taxes are no joke. That's probably, I think if I put those two things together, that's probably about 20% of what I'm raising is for American taxes. And health insurance, yeah, it's not fun. Yes, I have. What I'll do is after we're done here, before everybody leaves, I'd love to get everybody's emails because I have a newsletter that goes out that has prayer requests on the bottom. So I'd love for everybody to sign to sign up for the newsletter because I really need that prayer. And then I'll also have like little cards that have website address for like a website that has for like more information about what I do and stuff. So yes, it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is it. I do have cards with my face on them. So so you guys don't forget what I look like and stuff. But yeah. So I brought plenty for everybody. So if everybody wants to take one or just one per family, or I don't really care. You can take as many as you want. I have a lot. So but yeah, I also have an email newsletter list. So I'll put that on the back table also with a pin, so everybody can sign up for that. Hopefully, so I could use the prayer requests. I could use the prayer. But yeah. Anyway, any other questions? Yeah, the Lord loves to do things in His time and not in my time. So, if I mean, I've seen the Lord do so many things in such short, like, last-minute things, and so, it may sound like a lot, but $100,000 does not really scare me that much. It scares a lot of people around me, which kind of sometimes is a little disheartening, but it doesn't scare me as much as it used to. If that's how much I had to raise the first year, I would have been like, what? You know, what? But no, so yeah, it's not so bad anymore. Luckily, Lord builds our faith. I think He builds our faith through a lot of trial and error. So, yeah. Anyway.
Right. Let's stand. All right, we just extend hands there. We're just going to pray for Anna. Lord, we just thank you for Anna, for her willingness, Lord, to obey you and to, Lord, go and to all the world. Especially, this is such a cool thing she's doing, and those that are forgotten, Lord. So we just thank you for your provision that you're going to provide for her, Lord. It's just as easy for you to raise 100,000 as it is for $1. So, Lord, thank you. Just release your blessing on her, your provision on her, and Lord, just put it all, bring all things into order, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.